But here's the deal. One of my agents came to me the other day and said, Mark, I've got kind of an unusual situation. I've got a cash transaction, but I'm not sure how real they are. Now, fraud, of course, can run rampant in the real estate industry. It has for years and years and years. So what does that mean? It means lots of different things in many different ways within our industry, but let me just talk about one of them, and it comes down to earnest money deposit. You guys know what earnest money deposit is. That's when we do a purchase agreement and we give them our earnest. We're showing them that we are indeed serious. We're giving them what's called consideration, something of some monetary value. Typically comes in the form of a check or a wire transfer. And it gets processed with a purchase agreement. Now, each state is a little bit different in terms of what their rules are, so you have to check your own state. But let me explain this to you. This is really important. Let me tell you what's important about it. Sellers and agents can get burned badly if they don't know what they're doing or they do this the wrong way. In fact, there are buyers out there that can play the game in a way that can tie up a property to not allow it to sell in a timely fashion by signing a purchase agreement, not depositing the earnest money deposit into escrow. And the next thing you know, what do you have? You have a signed contract with no consideration, no earnest money deposit. So when this agent came to me and said, Mark, I'm kind of concerned about this, I said, well, go old school with this thing. And he's like, I don't know what old school means. I said, well, let me explain to you what I mean by that. Back in the day, now I know there's gonna be a lot of you young ones out there gonna be like, oh, you and your old school, I don't wanna hear about it. We know better, we're smarter than that. That's great. But don't pay attention if you don't want to. But let me tell you how we used to do it. And it's kind of important because if you do it this way, you'll actually protect yourself and your clients. And by the way, that little thing called fiduciary responsibility, right? You're supposed to look out for your client, look out for your seller. Yeah, I'm gonna get a little sarcastic with this because some people just kind of brush it under the rug, but I don't brush fiduciary responsibility under the rug. And so we're supposed to have reasonable care and accounting on behalf of our clients. Well, if you're a good real estate agent, you're going to take this seriously. So, back to my story. What can you do if you're going old school? Well, back in the day, you guys, when we'd have a purchase agreement, one of the things that we would always do is that we would have the purchase agreement would always be accompanied by the earnest money deposit check. So literally when a buyer is coming along and they're working with their agent and they're signing off on the purchase agreement, they would write a check, a physical check, and they would give it to their real estate agent, and the real estate agent would have this purchase agreement signed by the buyer, not signed by the seller, and they would have the check. And they would then go over, many times back in the day, they would now take that purchase agreement with that check and they would say, hey, seller agent, can I meet up with you? I want to present to you this offer. This is back in the day when we actually presented offers. Sometimes we presented offers to the real estate agent and to the seller. We'd actually sit down with both the parties and go, hi, I'm very excited to tell you about my buyers. I'm excited to tell you about the offer. This was the old days of doing real estate. There's a lot to be said for that, by the way, you guys, but I won't go down that road today. But here's what's important. The check was with the purchase agreement. The money was there. It was real money. Yes, it was in the form of a check, but it was real money. Seller would sign off on the purchase agreement, or they would work through the counter offer. They would come to the final signatures. The check goes in and opens the escrow immediately. Okay, lots of state laws about how long you're allowed to take before you open escrow. I'll use Minnesota, for example, where I'm sitting here today. It's a little bit different in Minnesota versus Illinois versus Wisconsin versus Colorado, etc. But here we basically often have 2 days, 2 business days to deposit it and check into escrow and open escrow. So states govern this very closely, just like they govern the trust accounts by title companies and real estate brokerages who handle these funds. This is a big deal. This isn't a little deal. This is very, very much a governed part of the transaction. So here's the thing, you guys. Back in the day, that check was right there with the purchase agreement. It got deposited and everything was good. You know what happens now? Not that. That doesn't happen anymore. In fact, it used to be that you'd make a copy of the check, and maybe a copy of the check would accompany the purchase agreement. Thankfully, some agents will still do that. But oftentimes you're processing purchase agreements and there's really no copy of an earnest deposit check, much less the earnest deposit check. So I told my agent the other day, I said, here's what I would do if I were you. If we're in question about that buyer and that cash deal and how real they are, do we really want them to go get a purchase agreement signed off by the buyer, signed off by the seller? Because at that point, you guys, I have an executed contract. That's a big deal. That executed contract is something that you can actually go place a lien against a property. I can place a lien with a purchase agreement against a piece of property. Now, if you don't understand what liens are, you should, okay? You really need to, like a mortgage is a lien or back taxes is a lien. There's lots of different types of liens out there. I won't go into that. This is a separate video. It'd be a good video, by the way. But on this case, a purchase agreement can be a lienable instrument. What if you have a purchase agreement and nobody gives you earnest money deposit? Now, it's easy to say, well, but Mark, they're in breach of contract. It says right on the purchase agreement, earnest money deposit must be deposited within 2 days or 3 days of the purchase agreement. If they don't do that, Mark, it's a breach of contract, right? And I go, yeah, that's correct. So therefore, that contract must be null and void, right? And I go, nope. Well, what do you mean? It's a breach of contract. Yeah, it doesn't work quite that easy. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give you legal advice. You can get your own legal advice from a qualified lawyer. But here's what I can tell you, is that we just entered into a complicated mess. I've been in this mess. It's a rotten place to be trying to chase down a buyer and get earnest money deposit. In fact, there are professional bad buyers out there. They could probably make a living doing this. Signing purchase agreements, not giving earnest money deposit, and coming along and saying, yeah, I don't know if I want to buy that property, but yeah, I'm not going to give you earnest money deposit. Yeah, I'm not going to cancel it. They just tied up that property. They could go put a lien against that property with that contract. And suddenly, the seller is stuck, their agent is stuck, and we have a mess. Now, there's solutions to this mess, like there's a solution to just about every single mess in life. And we have ways of canceling this through what's called statutory cancellation. Each state is a little bit different. You can check your state laws on how you can cancel a purchase agreement, talk to your broker owner, talk to your legal counsel, all the rest of it. Statutory cancellation is one of the most useful tools for canceling a purchase agreement. But there's nothing typically very fast about doing a statutory cancellation. A professional bad buyer, if they really wanted to, is that they could come along and go, you know what, if you give me $2,000, I'll sign a cancellation. Could they hold the seller hostage and say, well, I got your property tied up during this entire time period. You can't sell it, but if you want to give me some money, maybe I'll sign off on this. That actually happens in this business. It's crazy. So, what do you do to mitigate this? How do we not get ourselves in this little transactional processing pickle? Well, you do what you used to do. And we say, you know what? I'm going to need your earnest money deposit money at the same time I'm taking in your purchase agreement. In fact, I can even go and consider putting it into escrow, and if I need to release it out of escrow, but I'm going to get your monies put into escrow because my seller's requiring to actually have true consideration in order for them to execute this purchase agreement. Listen, I'll stop there. This was a long enough ramble. I dig this stuff. I love it. I love talking about it. I hope you find it useful in some way. I hope you'll subscribe to Results in Real Estate, kind of track what we're talking about. I sure would appreciate it. I'm glad you're with me today. Thank you so much.